My name is Akilah Chatman. I recently just graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science from Drexel University. I've done and led a lot of research about environmental justice, and so this frames from developing water quality sensors for agricultural uses to doing audits of technical reports of organizations as to like how they can better incorporate environmental justice into the work they do. Environmental justice is actually something that is still being well defined, and I would say is not very correctly defined by the EPA and other government agencies. I would say that it's the interactions between people's like identities and ways that they have been discriminated against and the way that they experience living in the world, particularly with like the very physical environment. And so this has to do with like more specifically issues of heat island effect and like flooding in cities, but it also can be lack of clean access to water or lack of access to like ancestral land. Well, justice, I would say, is a way of looking at the world and like how can we right wrongs that are done. So looking at it through an environmental perspective is just one of the ways in which it affects people. So something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I actually just finished my capstone project about this, is the way that like because this country as we know it post-colonial era has been shaped and built by slavery, how do those lasting impacts affect Black and brown people in this country today? And so my specific project was looking at how the plots that slaves were sometimes allowed to grow their own food on, how that in plantation has transported to where we are today with the city and, for example, community gardens. I would say that it's a divine right of all people who live on the planet, but also not just people, any entity. And so there's a big emphasis in science right now where people try to distinguish themselves and other beings as separate. And this tends to lead to a hierarchy where we view humanness as the top of that triangle. So we don't take into consideration the rights of the land, of the water, of other biota, of biodiversity as is. We have a hierarchy in the types of animals in which we care for. There are a lot of things that people could do. So I guess it's really a matter of the scale that you're looking at. So if you're asking like, what can you as an individual do to help the environment? You could not litter. You could pick up litter as you see it. If we want to think about like things that are going to have more lasting change, it's not a one-person issue. There are a lot of entities, organizations, governments, military complexes that are wholly responsible for the amount of environmental degradation that we see today. And so it's a matter of not only just like holding them accountable, but disenfranchising those systems so that they can't change what they're doing to look a different way, similarly to how the city is just another version of a plantation. There are people in power that don't want these things to happen, and they can give you a lot of reasons as to why it is or why it's not just or why it's financially feasible. But the fact of the matter is they've created a society in which we look at the value of money as more important than the value of life, because we're all affected by it. One of the most specific examples that I can think about is, so I grew up in Miami, Florida, and you know, everybody likes to go there for spring break and trash our beaches, but also because of the geography of Florida being a peninsula, one that is at sea level, we don't have any natural hills or that kind of thing. Within the trends that we're seeing for sea level rise between the next 50 years, the next 100 years, the house I grew up in is going to be underwater. And so how the rich elite are looking at that is they're trying to predict where the waterfront property is going to be in 50 years, versus there are communities of Haitians in Miami that are going to lose a place to live, and there's no system in place to help them figure out what they're going to do.